Charles, we've selected a movie parody today that I admittedly know nothing about, but this K-pop Demon Hunters is all the rage. So we've got the GOP Demon Hunters. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Jason. Thanks for having me back on. I'm about to get on an airplane, a series of airplanes, and head to as yet undisclosed locations. But very happy here, settled in, working hard on my weight training program, which is a pleasure with this particular trainer whose name is Hussein. A very nice guy. Anyway,
Saddam?
yeah, let's hope that these demon hunters are actually going to chase down some demons. I mean, Trump is just Truth Social, or whatever the right phrase is, something suggesting that that Alex and George Soros be put up on RICO charges for using their quote charity empire to fund Antifa and Arabella advisors and other elements that are behind these No Kings protests, these indivisible protests. I think Trump's only got 5% of the message here because Bill Gates has been abusing the strict prohibition against private foundations claiming that they donate money to public charities when in fact the public charities are not public charities. Case in point is the Clinton Foundation. Schweitzer and his co-researcher have a piece out saying that that Bill Gates gave $214 million to these various things. Bill Gates has given a lot more than that to Clinton charities that frankly don't exist. They do not lawfully exist. And apparently he was just meeting with Trump in the Oval Office. So I'm going to bet he was in there pleading for mercy. Insofar as the United States government has decided no longer to fund, these various vaccine charities that Gates has been funding. And I think the U.S. government's also beginning to take a close look at exactly what the World Health Organization does. Bill Gates, I believe, is the largest non-government donor to the World Health Organization. Some say he's given as much as 10% of what they spend, which is a gigantic sum to an organization based in Geneva that's run by a moron, a criminal moron. Dr. Tedros is he's not a medical doctor. He stands accused in his own country of abusing his position to basically commit genocide, to wipe out a rival ethnicity in Ethiopia when he was in government there, when he's an avowed Maoist, not simply Marxist, but Maoist. And he thought under Biden that he would get away with having the World Health Organization's dictates be more powerful than the U.S. Constitution. And we nearly fell into that trap under Biden. Thank God Trump has changed that. So it seems that, perhaps the long wait to get to see justice almost done by prosecuting this gigantic network of unregulated charities. I mean, you think back to what was going on in the Tea Party days in 2010 and afterwards, where Lois Lerner and her band of criminals, egged on by Holder and Obama and others, not only made it very tough for existing charities to get together, but in the days when the Tea Party was erupting, and it really was a spontaneous eruption. I actually was at several of the early meetings. I even spoke. Here's a guy who knows something about fraud. Put him up on the pedestal. And I literally stood on top of not a soapbox, but a wooden crate to address a crowd of maybe 150, 200 people. I went out on the steps of the Westchester County Courthouse to do the same thing in 2010. And it was just really very spontaneous, and it wasn't violent and whatever. But Obama and Holder and Clinton and the others were threatened by it. So they directed the IRS, probably using their private emails, to torture applicants that had Tea Party or Constitution or the right-wing charities that were coming together were subjected to massive abuses. onerous application requirements, intrusive questions about donors that you're not supposed to ask. And this went on for years in between 2010 and afterwards through May of 2013 when Lois Lerner dropped the bomb at some conference. There was a planted question, I think around May 10th or thereabouts, 2013. And she sheepishly, in theory, admitted that there had been problems with the Cincinnati office. There weren't problems with the Cincinnati office. There were problems with the entire organization, including Obama's cabinet. So back then, the IRS could definitely go after charities that they felt they had the resources then to go after what they believed were miscreant charities, partisan political operations operating in the guise of charity. Now, 12 years later, these creeps try to claim that they don't have the resources to check and see when a charity like the Clinton Foundation that was supposed to be a library, presidential library, and it got its authorization saying we're only going to operate in Little Rock inside the city park. And then the instant Bill was freed from the White House, he decided a library was too boring for him. And he changed, though he had no role, no named role as either an officer, trustee, director, contractor, none of that. He, with, again, no authority, managed to appropriate the resources of this charity, solicit in the guise of being a public charity when his activities were certainly not charitable. Promoting the use of generic drugs for a crooked company is hardly, is explicitly not. There's a court decision, Federated Pharmacies, which is an on-point decision that shows that that's just not, creating a purchasing consortium to buy drugs on a basis where the generic companies get business that they wouldn't otherwise have gotten and also make a profit on it. That is business development. It's not a charity. And moreover, Bill claimed that he was working as an agent. But he didn't use the words as an agent, but he claimed that the operation was acting as agent, and he didn't register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act at a time from 2009 to 13 when Hillary Clinton was a very senior member of the cabinet, strictly prohibited. So, they don't have we now know that there was an FBI investigation from 1 to 5. There may have been one around 2008. We're not really sure on that. There is a reference to something, a New Orleans subpoena is issued, I think, in 2008, not in connection with what, I don't know. And then we know that an investigation was opened up in 16. We know that Sally Yates said shut it down by March of 16, so it really wasn't much of an investigation. We also know there was an investigation open and shut in 18, and another one open and shut in 19. And they can't see, they don't have the resources to see what you and I see, what Peter Schweitzer saw, what Dan Halper saw, what many others have seen about this fake charity, the Clinton Foundation. So it's very good news that this is on Trump's mind when it comes to George and Alex Soros. And in particular, I think, there aren't many people who know a lot about charities and hedge funds. And I certainly don't know as much about hedge funds as George Soros does, but I know a lot about them. You shouldn't be running simultaneously a hedge fund and a charity. You just shouldn't be doing that because, it's tough. And you certainly shouldn't be running a charity that has international operations. At the same time, you're shorting government debt across the developing world, across the entire world, actually, not just the developed world, but the developing world as well.
What if that charity is focused on destroying the governments in those countries? Should you do it then?
Is that bad? No, of course you can't. Of course you can't.
I didn't know.
Whoops. Yeah, of course that's horrible.
Yeah, no, that was a loaded question. Softball.
I know. And if you think about it, we now know that USAID, from what the Doge work, that USAID was one of the government aid streams, where the congressmen and senators would say, oh, woe is me. If we don't have USAID, the millions of people's lives around the planet will be destroyed. Well, then we give the money to USAID and we hear from USAID, woe is me. We don't have the resources to deploy this money. Let's give it to a whole bunch of charities that are out of control, where just by the by, money that comes out of the USAID to the charities goes back into the hands of the families of these politicians who voted for USAID money. This is a massive scandal that Doge uncovered, that the Democrats are terrified, in particular, and rhinos are terrified that Trump is actually going to get to the bottom of it, which is why dopey, crooked Chuck Schumer and his criminal allies in the Senate are doing something that's not getting enough press. They are stopping most of Trump's remaining appointments from being approved by the Senate, in bold contrast to what happened under Obama and Biden. When Democrats have a president, they say, the president has an absolute right to his nominees, the kookier the better. And Republicans just shut up, and you have the right to advise and consent. You don't have the right to advise and reject, right? But when Trump gets in, oh, no, Trump doesn't have a mandate. We're going to just advise until the chickens come home. We're going to wait until 2029 to give our consent. This is something that I think Trump needs to be tougher on.
Yeah, I mean, he's letting them run roughshod. So, I mean, hopefully that's why he needs these demon hunters in there. Certainly Schumer qualifies as a demon. It's ridiculous, Charles. So much energy expended on trying to hold the country back and prevent these things from happening. I mean, they'll argue that they're fighting tyranny. It's amazing how, there's all these different news outlets going around and just talking to a person on the street. A lot of them happen to be black in Washington, D.C. Right. And I'm seeing a lot of clips where they're sort of like blowing up in their face, where their CNN person wants this black person to say Trump is terrible. But every single one of them so far has said, oh, no, this is good. He's getting crime off the streets.
Well, I mean, I didn't flee New York City, but, New York had sunk to a depth by July of last year that was lower than I'd ever seen it. And of course, I'm older than I was in the last crisis in the 70s, so I'm more vulnerable. But, what these assholes like Elizabeth Warren and Jamie Raskin and Chuck Schumer, who all live very comfortable lives. I mean, I think Warren has a mansion in part derived from her ill-gotten gains as a law professor at Harvard, a position she got on false pretenses, lying about her ancestry. So she's very comfortable. Most of the people in the Senate and the House are reasonably comfortable. And certainly these prominent lefties all get the speaking gigs and these contracts and that freebie and whatever. Nancy Pelosi is there, multiple mansions, a vineyard, trading nonstop on insider information, multimillionaire. These people are so far away from the communities that are just devastated by Democratic policies, the inner cities across the blue states. People talk, there's some moron governor, Wes Moore in Maryland, and an even dumber mayor in Baltimore pretending that Baltimore doesn't have high crime. The reason Baltimore doesn't have high crime and these blue cities don't have high crime is they just say, all right, in calculating the crime statistics, let's just eliminate all the crimes, okay? And then we won't have any crime. Like it's the Pete Buttigieg solution for crime. You remember when he had a problem with ports being clogged, he said, all right, instead of having the ports clogged, I'll just leave the ships 100 miles out to sea, and then the ports won't be clogged. But of course, the goods won't come into the country either. I mean, these are just morons. And I remember with a person whose name I don't want to bring up, going to Baltimore, staying in the Marriott in the harbor there, and we could see these restaurants were walking distance away, and we're about to walk out the door when the concierge said, "Sir, I wouldn't do that. I would not walk out the front door. It's very dangerous. It's like 7 p.m. It's very dangerous.
Wow.
You're likely going to get mugged on the way to the restaurant. If you survive that, you get mugged coming back." Please,
So what did they want you to do? Take a car from the hotel or something?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like 3 blocks away.
Wow.
And that was more than 10 years ago. And I don't think Baltimore has gotten better. And actually, another time we were going to Baltimore, we made a wrong turn. We went left instead of going right, which is something I don't like to do generally. But anyway, we're driving along and we get to this notice in the sidewalk. There are all these people on the stoop, vacant eyes, drug addicts, white, black, Hispanic, dazed. It was like you went into a horror movie. And we had the spectacle that a moron, I think her name is Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston.
Yeah.
She came up with a brilliant idea of distributing drug injection mechanisms and other paraphernalia for free to the homeless population. So what did the homeless population do? Shoot up on drugs in the most fashionable parts of Boston. I mean, these policies, I mean, you really ought to have, people say, Trump has dementia, Trump needs a medical exam. I think these people who are, whether it's Zoran Mondani or these other, if you're going to run for a position where you have anything to say about a budget that is larger than 500,000, and New York is 125 billion or whatever it is, you should have to sit for exams in finance, economics, I mean, real exams, basic arithmetic. I don't think these fools, many of these elected fools, can balance their own paychecks. I mean, their own checkbooks, rather. And when we get to Lisa Cook, I looked at a little more digging into her background. I mean, she's not qualified. Forget about being a woman in black. She's an idiot. She's a basic fool. And she's been caught, as Scott Bessent said on Maria Bartiromo, well, she's done a lot of talking, but she hasn't yet said, I didn't do this, right? She hasn't vigorously, so she did this. I mean, Pulte has her dead to rights. Other Fed governors, mostly white men, when caught, and it's amazing that there are 3 examples of people who were caught with suspicious trading, they promptly resigned. This moron has been fired, and she's saying, well, not really. I don't want to leave, so I haven't been fired, so I'm going to contest this, and hires that expensive Abby Lowell. Where does she come up with the money for that?
I don't know. I mean, it seems to be, I would be curious to know if one of Norm Ison's, 501c3/C4 organizations isn't doing this. They almost like to select a person like this and then sponsor their lawsuit so that they can just go against Trump. This Atlantic article is saying her case could be the whole ball game. What?
What do you mean the whole ball game? I mean, the
it's
point
as
is,
if the Supreme Court lets Trump replace Cook with a loyalist, he might soon achieve a full-blown takeover of the Federal Reserve. I mean, this is so stupid and sidesteps the fact that this woman is accused of fraud. By the way, the rules, I was listening to a broadcast about this. It doesn't say that she needs to be convicted of fraud. It's that the president can fire her for cause. So that means if there's sufficient evidence that he thinks, look, this is just a bad look for somebody who's supposed to be involved with the Fed, you're dealing with interest rates and stuff like this, and here you are signing 2 mortgages claiming both of these homes are your primary residence. You just got to get the hell out of here. That's cause. It doesn't need to be...
Right.
The controversy around it is sufficient cause.
Right, and I agree. And the other thing, I mean, people always talk when it's a Republican, the issue is the appearance of impropriety.
Right.
That's the standard by which you have to step down. But, in this case, actually, Jay Powell and Cook have some serious problems. Because if Jay lets that bitch, and she is a bitch for doing this, she's really going to make it difficult for other black women to follow in her footsteps by behaving in this way. And
hasn't she already done that, Charles? Anytime. It's like when Jeffrey Epstein does crimes, when Alan Dershowitz is a schmuck, it doesn't really help this image that, the Jews are doing everything. So likewise, when a black woman gets appointed to some historic position and the first thing that happens is credible evidence that she's involved in fraud comes out, it's really not good.
Right, especially when there's a bunch of other people doing the same thing. Many of them happen to be Democrats. Now, the problem, though, is, the Fed meets and she's on the board. So if she attends a board meeting, having been fired, and dares to vote, then that compromises the vote, the integrity of the Fed. This is a selfish bitch, right? To do this to think, and shame on the Fed for not catching this earlier. Why did it fall to?
New York Times calls it an attempt. I mean, could you imagine if someone worked for you and you fired them and they had the audacity to say, "Oh, Charles attempted to fire me"? It's like, wait a minute, what are you doing here still? Get out.
No, I mean, in her case, I actually would yank her the fuck out of the office. I don't know if you can get marshals to take her out of there, but I would get her out of there.
I heard that they're considering that, but this is basically like, didn't they try to fire Kramer? And I don't know.
Yeah.
He just started showing up for work and didn't actually work there. And then one day they say, "Oh, well, we hate to do this because you don't actually work here, but you're fired."
That's Kramer. I think, didn't George Costanza get fired?
Oh, that's it. George got fired and then just came in the next day and acted like it didn't happen. Yeah.
Actually, that happened. There was a guy, Dylan Reed. Now he's a billionaire, but he showed up for work on his first day on a Friday, and a senior partner, he had a very bad interaction with a senior partner in the firm. He was fired. So he came back, Friday afternoon, and his wife said to him, "How's work? How's Dylan Reed? What's it like?" I said, "Well, I didn't really get much of a chance to find out. I was fired." And the wife said to him, "What? On your first day?" And, they thought about it, and the wife said to him, "Listen, just show up on Monday and pretend that nothing happened." And that's what he did.
Had that Seinfeld episode come out yet or
no?
Oh my God, that's unbelievable.
Pre-Seinfeld. Yeah.
That guy's groundbreaking.
And then I won't say who he is, but then, he's one of these guys who cannot read the room well. So it took him forever. Normally the path to partnership is, I think, 9 years, and it took him something like 17 years to make partner. And then he is older than I am, much older. And in these Monday meetings that we would have as managing directors, where everyone had to go around the table and talk, he'd go on and on and on about this energy statistic and that energy statistic, and brag that he was on the phone with Nick Brady talking about it, when Nick was Treasury Secretary. And one of the top partners leaned over to me and said, "You want to know why Nick speaks to him?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" "Because he's always wrong." And he asked Brian, this guy's opinion, what do you think about energy? And he says, prices are going up, and Nick knows they're going to go down. Anyway, this guy had the last laugh, because when Dylan Reed was sold at one point to a Swiss bank, the rules precluded Dylan Reed and the Swiss bank from continuing to have this energy fund, which is a very successful fund. So it was just given to this guy. And, starting with, let's say, low millions, today he's a multi-billionaire. So, funny story.
Huh. Amazing, Charles. Well, we only have just about a minute here until we're going to head over to the First Amendment Forum. People can join us on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. That's amazing that guy pioneered the method of just showing up like nothing happened. Maybe Seinfeld heard about that and then wrote the show about it.
That's right. It's funny. But, Cook, if you're hiring Abby Lowell to defend yourself, because you did such a great job with Hunter Biden, you're not going to get a pardon. Jay Powell can't pardon you. And, Bill Pulte and Donald Trump want you out. You're out. And she will leave.
Yeah. From the client's point of view, I guess Abby Lowell did a pretty good job for Hunter Biden because he didn't go to jail. And for a minute there, it seemed like he definitely might. So you're right. The pardon is a wild card on that. But we've got a lot more to discuss, Charles. We'll be back in less than 5 minutes. So stay with us, everybody. Join us